welcome to our channel, the place where the most dramatic and inspiring stories are waiting for you. Today we'll dive into a journey full of twists and turns. A black CEO who was fired in public, humiliated in front of everyone, and seemed to lose everything in an instant. But that dark moment turned into an unbelievable opportunity. Step by step, you'll see how he overcame humiliation, turned failure into power, and made the very investors who rejected him beg to fund his next startup. This 8-chapter story is filled with shocking details that will take you from anger to suspense, and finally, to an emotional breakthrough. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss this powerful and gripping journey. A story that will keep you hooked from beginning to end. The grand ballroom of the luxury hotel glittered under the crystal chandeliers. Hundreds of guests in tailored suits sipped red wine, murmuring about the bright future of the booming corporation. On the surface, it looked like a night of celebration. In reality, a storm was brewing. Our main character, Marcus Johnson, a young, ambitious black CEO known for his bold leadership, stepped onto the stage. Once celebrated as the pride of the company, the man who had transformed a small brand into a Wall Street sensation, Marcus expected to deliver another inspiring speech. But tonight, the audience wasn't waiting to applaud him. They were waiting for his downfall. The chairman of the board, an old man with silver hair and a smirk sharp enough to cut glass, suddenly snatched the microphone. "As of today, Marcus Johnson is no longer our CEO," he declared coldly. The room shattered like a wine glass hitting marble. Some gasped, others smirked, and a few openly rejoiced. Marcus stood frozen, heart clenching in disbelief. Whispers slithered through the crowd. "Told you, a black man could never last long in that seat." Finally, the board came to its senses. "Watch the stock price rebound now that he's gone." Each word was a dagger. Marcus bit his lip, fighting to stay composed, but a bitter thought echoed in his mind. Have they already forgotten who pulled this company back from the brink of bankruptcy? On that stage, he felt like an actor robbed of his role in front of a live audience. One moment a hero, the next a discarded pawn. Yet instead of breaking, his eyes burned with a defiant fire, because Marcus knew one thing. This wasn't the end. It was only the prologue to a story far more powerful than anyone in that room could imagine. Marcus walked away from the stage, the whispers growing louder with every step. Each stride felt like dragging 1,000 pounds, yet he kept his back straight, his head high. He knew one thing. If he looked down now, they'd tear him apart even more. As he descended, a reporter shoved forward, microphone raised. "Marcus, how do you feel about being fired in front of everyone?" The crowd chuckled, phones shot up, recording his humiliation. For a split second, Marcus wanted to lash out, to unleash the fury boiling inside him. Instead, he gave a cold, sharp smile. "Make sure you record this moment. You'll need it later, for the story of my comeback." The room fell silent for a heartbeat, then erupted with mocking laughter. They thought he was delusional, but Marcus's eyes no longer held confusion, only resolve. He pushed through the doors, and the glass panels reflected a man stripped of his title, yet unbroken, a warrior preparing for his counterattack. Outside, the first storm of the season raged, heavy rain slashing across the city. A hotel staffer rushed with an umbrella, but Marcus ignored it, stepping straight into the downpour. Cold rain streamed down his face, mingling with sweat, washing away the last remnants of humiliation. His mind flashed back to his early days. Nights fueled by stale coffee, scribbled business plans on scraps of paper, knocking on doors of banks and investors who wouldn't even give him a seat. He had built an empire from nothing, and they thought one night could erase all that? Marcus laughed, a bitter, defiant laugh. Deep down, he knew. Those who mocked him tonight would soon choke on their laughter. Marcus walked out of the hotel into the pounding rain, his expensive leather shoes sinking into puddles he didn't care to avoid. New York at night was usually a noisy symphony. Honking horns, rain-hammering rooftops, hurried footsteps on sidewalks. But for Marcus, the city faded into silence. All he could hear was the thundering of his own heartbeat. His phone buzzed. The caller ID flashed, "Mom." Marcus hesitated, then answered. Her trembling voice cracked through the line, filled with worry. "Marcus, I just saw the news. Did they really fire you like that?" He took a deep breath, forcing calm into his tone. "Yes, Mom. Right in front of everyone." Silence. Then, in a soft whisper, she said, "Son, They can take away your title, but no one can ever take away your mind or your determination. Remember, you built everything once from nothing. You can do it again." Marcus closed his eyes, letting her words pour into him like warmth against the cold rain. All his life he'd faced doubtful stares, prejudice, and doors slammed in his face. But his mother's voice had always been the anchor, reminding him that no failure was ever the final word. When the call ended, Marcus lifted his head toward the stormy sky and whispered like a vow, "If they think my story is over, they're about to witness the next chapter." The neon glow of the city skyscrapers lit up his rain-soaked face, painting the image of a man who had been torn down but refused to break, ready for a comeback no one would see coming. Marcus wandered down the long street, neon billboards flashing past his determined eyes. He stopped in front of a small corner cafe, the same place where years ago he and a group of young dreamers sketched out their very first business plan. The wooden door creaked as he pushed it open, and the smell of freshly roasted coffee filled the air, dragging him back to those sleepless nights of hope and anxiety. He sat at the familiar window seat, pulling from his blazer pocket an old leather notebook with worn edges. It was his lucky notebook, the one he had carried since his earliest startup days. As his fingers flipped through the messy handwriting of old ideas, it struck him his success had never come from a shiny CEO title. It had always come from the fire inside him. Outside, the rain kept falling, drops racing down the glass like a countdown clock. Marcus uncapped his pen and wrote boldly on a fresh page, "Next startup. Not just to change my life, but to change the game." His eyes gleamed, a faint smile tugging at his lips. That very night, the night of his public humiliation, was also the birth of a new empire. He didn't know how brutal the road ahead would be, but one thing was certain. History would not remember him as the CEO who was fired. It would remember him as the man who came back stronger than ever. Outside, yellow cabs rushed through the storm. Inside the cafe, a dream was reborn, and Marcus Johnson was ready for the biggest fight of his life. The next morning, New York was still damp from the night's storm. Marcus sat by the window of his small Brooklyn apartment, watching the early sunlight spill over the gray skyline. He'd barely slept, but his eyes weren't tired. They burned with fire. On his desk, the leather notebook lay open. He had scribbled a dozen ideas through the night, but one stood out. A fintech platform designed specifically for Black entrepreneurs, and others often shut out of the traditional financial system. Marcus knew that pain all too well. He had once knocked on countless doors of banks and investors, only to be turned away again and again. His phone buzzed. It was David, his former co-founder, the friend who had stood with him in the early days of building their first company. Marcus hesitated, then answered. "Marcus, I heard what happened last night. The way they treated you, it's unacceptable." Marcus chuckled with a bitter edge. "Welcome to the real world, where loyalty is nothing but scrap paper to a boardroom." David paused, his voice softening. "So, what's next for you?" Marcus stared at the words he'd just written in his notebook, his eyes gleaming. "I'm going to build something they'll regret turning their backs on." That answer landed like an arrow driven into the ground, a declaration of war. Marcus knew this time he wasn't just fighting for himself, he was fighting for everyone who had been left behind, for dreams that had never been given a chance. Marcus spent the entire morning making calls, digging through his old contacts. He knew one truth. To launch a startup, ideas weren't enough. He needed people, those willing to wade through the mud of entrepreneurship all over again. The first call went to Rachel, a brilliant software engineer who had once worked under him. When she heard his voice, she went quiet for a long moment. "I saw the news," she said. "I still can't believe they did that to you." Marcus took a steady breath. "Rachel, I'm building something new. Bigger, bolder. I want you on board." Rachel chuckled softly. "Funny thing, I was just about to quit my job. You calling today? Feels like fate." The second call was to Luis, a Latino financial expert long underestimated by Wall Street. After hearing Marcus's pitch, Luis burst into laughter. "You just got fired in front of the world, and now you want to start another company? Marcus, you're insane. But damn, that sounds exciting." One by one, the calls pieced together the puzzle. Marcus didn't promise big salaries. He didn't promise sleek offices. He promised only one thing. "We're going to build something the world can't ignore." By nightfall, Marcus's small Brooklyn apartment glowed with lamplight. The dining table was buried under laptops, notepads, and half-empty coffee mugs. Rachel, Luis, and David sat shoulder to shoulder with Marcus. None of them had much to their names, except faith in a future no one else dared to imagine. But right there, in that cramped room, a colossal dream began to take shape. The early days of the startup were nothing like the glittering city lights. Instead, they smelled of burnt coffee, crowded tables stacked with scribbled notes, and arguments that dragged late into the night. Rachel sat glued to her laptop, typing furiously. She frowned, running her hands through her hair. "The idea's great, Marcus, but this tech isn't simple. We need servers, security systems, all of it costs money." Luis leaned back in his chair, sighing. "Money, money, money. That's always the problem. Banks won't touch us, especially with your name being mocked across the headlines." Marcus stayed quiet, his eyes locked on the worn leather notebook. They weren't wrong. Most investors avoided people who had just been humiliated in public. The media was feasting on him with headlines screaming, "Black CEO falls, a harsh lesson for dreamers." The whole city seemed to be betting on his next failure. Yet, in the thick of the gloom, Marcus chuckled softly. He lifted his gaze, looking each of them straight in the eye. "That's exactly why we're going to succeed. If it were easy, everyone would do it. But when the world turns its back, that's when we'll show them what rising from the ashes really looks like." Rachel and Luis exchanged a glance, then nodded. Inside that tiny apartment, hope was as fragile as a thread, but Marcus knew sometimes a single spark was enough to light up the whole night sky. That night, while the team had collapsed onto chairs in exhaustion, Marcus stayed by the window, staring at the city lights that shimmered like untapped opportunities. He opened his laptop, firing off a few emails pitching their idea, even though, deep down, he knew the chances of a reply were slim to none. Just as he was about to shut it down, a notification flashed. "Reply from Eleanor Grant." Marcus's heart skipped. Eleanor Grant, the legendary venture capitalist, known on Wall Street as the queen who sees the future. She rarely looked at small startups, and certainly never at someone who had just been publicly disgraced. He opened the email, reading each word carefully. "Marcus, I've been watching you for some time. You may have lost a company, but you haven't lost your ability to create value. If you truly have something new, meet me Monday morning. Convince me that this time you're not just coming back. You're going further than ever." Marcus clenched his fist, a surge of fire rushing through him. He spun around, shaking Rachel, Luis, and David awake. "Get up! Monday morning we have a meeting with Eleanor Grant." For a second, the room went silent, then erupted in cheers. In the middle of the night, their fragile dream had just been given a spark of real hope. And Marcus knew the real battle was only just beginning. Monday morning, New York's sky was unusually clear, as if the entire city was holding its breath for what was about to happen. Marcus adjusted his tie, studying his reflection in the mirror. His heart pounded, not out of fear of failure, but because he knew this moment could shape his future. Rachel knocked, peeking in with a weary smile. "Guess what? I coded until 4 a.m. to get the demo running. It's not perfect, but it's enough to show Eleanor the potential." Marcus smiled, patting her shoulder. "Thank you, Rachel. We don't need perfect. We just need undeniable." Luis walked in, holding a thick stack of papers. "Preliminary financial projections. I modeled 3 scenarios, good, bad, and catastrophic." The team laughed, though tension lingered beneath the humor. Meanwhile, David fiddled with a borrowed mini-projector. "If this thing dies, we'll have to go old school, presenting with scribbles on scrap paper." Marcus shook his head, half amused, half touched. Before leaving the apartment, Marcus looked at them all, his voice steady and strong. "Listen, Eleanor Grant won't just be testing our idea. She'll be testing us. Let's show her that even as cast-offs, we can turn failure into fuel." The team nodded, eyes gleaming. They stepped out into the busy Manhattan streets, carrying with them fragile hope, but fierce determination. Today's meeting could change everything. The building where Eleanor Grant's office was located towered over Manhattan, a fortress of steel and glass, reflecting the morning sun like a monument to power. As Marcus and his team stepped inside, their footsteps echoed across the marble floor, reminding them they were entering an entirely different world. At the sleek reception desk, a staff member in a sharp suit greeted them. "Good morning. Who are you here to see?" Marcus's voice was steady, low. "We have an appointment with Eleanor Grant." The receptionist blinked in mild surprise, quickly checking the list. When the name was confirmed, she smiled politely. "Elevator on the left. Private access to the 42nd floor." The elevator ride was suffocatingly silent. Rachel bit her lip, whispering, "I still can't believe we're about to meet Eleanor Grant in person." Louise tried to lighten the mood. "If my heart beats any faster, this elevator might explode." They all chuckled, though nerves clung tight to their laughter. When the doors opened, they walked into a red-carpeted hallway lined with abstract paintings worth more than their entire lives' savings. At the end, a massive oak door swung open, and there she was, Eleanor Grant, seated before a wall of glass with Manhattan sprawling behind her. The woman, in her early 60s, wore her silver hair in an elegant bun. Her eyes were piercing, commanding silence with nothing more than a glance. She didn't rise. She merely gestured for them to enter, a simple movement that froze the room. Marcus swallowed hard. This was it, their very first battle. The silence in the spacious office was so sharp that the ticking of the clock echoed like a drumbeat. Eleanor Grant closed the folder in front of her and lifted her gaze, her eyes cutting straight through Marcus as though she could see every thought in his head. "Marcus Johnson," she began slowly, her voice calm but edged with steel. "You were fired in public less than a week ago. The press calls you a failure. So tell me, why should I waste my time listening to a failure pitch?" The tension in the room thickened. Rachel's fingers clenched the hem of her dress. Louise coughed nervously. David stared hard at the floor. All eyes turned to Marcus. He drew a deep breath, then smiled, not a forced grin but a confident one. "Ms. Grant, if you're only looking for founders who have never failed, you'll never find the great ones. They call me a failure, but my failure built a company once valued in the billions. I'm not here to prove I never failed. I'm here to prove that I've learned more from failure than most people ever will." Eleanor arched a brow. A brief pause, then she tapped her fingers lightly on the table. "Very well. Show me. What about your idea is bold enough to make me believe you can rise again?" Rachel quickly opened her laptop, projecting the demo onto the large screen. Numbers and charts appeared, modeling how their platform could connect overlooked entrepreneurs with capital. Eleanor's eyes didn't flicker, her laser-like gaze scanning every detail. Risky, complicated, plenty of competition. She tilted her head slightly, but perhaps worth hearing more. The atmosphere shifted, a crack opening in the wall of doubt.
Marcus knew he had cleared the first test. Eleanor closed her laptop, leaning back in her chair with arms crossed.
Her eyes stayed locked on Marcus, stripping away every layer of pretense. "All right, the idea sounds interesting, but I don't invest in promises. I invest in proof. Marcus, are you willing to let me test you right here, right now?" Marcus didn't flinch. "Absolutely," Eleanor pressed a small bell. The door opened and an assistant entered with a thick stack of files. Eleanor gestured toward it. "These are 10 startup founders I've rejected. Each has weaknesses that scared off investors. You have 15 minutes to choose one, then convince me your platform could turn them into a success story." The tension spiked. Rachel's eyes widened. 15 minutes. "That's a trap?" Louise bit his lip, exhaling sharply. "We're not prepared for this." Marcus calmly flipped through the files, his eyes darting across the dense pages. Then he looked up, meeting Eleanor's gaze with a half-smile. "Ms. Grant, you want to see if we can turn failure into opportunity? Then we'll take the hardest case." He dropped a file onto the table. The name on the cover, Angela Torres, founder of a bankrupt eco-fashion brand. Eleanor's brow arched, the corner of her mouth lifting slightly. "A risky choice. Good. Let's begin." The clock on the wall began its relentless ticking. The real battle had officially begun. The clock's ticking grew louder, hammering in their ears. 15 minutes. A span so short it wasn't even enough to finish a cup of coffee. But Marcus knew that in the startup world a few minutes could change everything. He took a deep breath, turning to his team. "Rachel, show her how our platform analyzes customer data." Louise, crunch the financial models. David, pull up the brand strategy examples. Rachel's fingers flew across the keyboard, projecting a dashboard of potential customers for Angela Torres's eco-fashion brand.
She failed because she targeted the wrong market.
But the data shows that if she pivots to Gen Z, an audience deeply invested in environmental values, growth can rebound within the first year. Luis jumped in, voice sharp and urgent. By combining a modest initial investment with our risk-sharing platform, the return on investment could hit 25% within 18 months. That's a number no serious investor ignores. David clicked to a new slide, speaking quickly. We can reposition Angela's brand not just as eco-fashion, but as a sustainable lifestyle symbol. Make her the face of young consumers who want to look good while saving the planet. Marcus straightened, his tone final and resolute. Ms. Grant, Angela Torres is not a failure. She's a dream placed in the wrong market, and our platform is the tool to bring that dream back, stronger than ever. In the opulent office, Eleanor Grant remained silent. Her eyes moved from the screen to the papers, then locked on Marcus. The corner of her lips lifted, the first sign that for the very first time that morning she was intrigued. Eleanor leaned back in her chair, fingers interlaced. She remained silent for what felt like an eternity, stretching the tension until it was almost unbearable. Then she let out a soft laugh, a mix of amusement and challenge. Interesting, she said. Very few teams would dare to pick the hardest case to prove themselves. That shows guts. Rachel exhaled in relief. Luis glanced quickly at Marcus, anticipating more praise, but Eleanor's tone suddenly sharpened, slicing the air. However, I've listened to hundreds of pitches like this. Everyone claims they're different. Everyone promises a dream. And when reality hits, most vanish like smoke. Marcus, why should I believe you're not just another smooth talker? The question struck like a dagger. No numbers, no slides, just Marcus, stripped bare. He drew in a steady breath, locking eyes with Eleanor, his voice unwavering. Because I've endured what most founders never have: public humiliation, loss in front of millions. If I can rise after that fall, then I can lead anyone to rise from their failures. This platform isn't just technology, it's the declaration of my life. For a moment the room froze. Eleanor tapped her finger against the table, her gaze unreadable, a flicker of something new sparking in her eyes. She said nothing yet, but Marcus could feel it. She was starting to see him differently. Eleanor stood silently for a moment, then walked over to the glass wall. Manhattan stretched out before her, skyscrapers rising like steel giants into the sky. She folded her arms, her voice low but sharp as steel. Marcus, you talk well, but talk is cheap. I want proof. She turned, her eyes blazing. If you truly believe in your platform, prove it now. Within 30 days, pick one failed entrepreneur, anyone from the list I gave you. Help them relaunch and generate real revenue. No demos, no theory. Real results. The team froze. Rachel almost shouted, 30 days? That's impossible. Luis shook his head, his face pale. Even the most prepared startups take months just to launch a product. Eleanor raised a hand, cutting him off. I don't care what's normal. I only invest in the extraordinary. You want my money? Show me you can do what others wouldn't even dare. Marcus stood still. His heart pounded, sweat forming at his temple. This wasn't just a challenge, it was a double-edged sword. If he succeeded, he would have Eleanor Grant backing him. If he failed, he would become Wall Street's laughingstock once more. He glanced at his team, Rachel, Luis, David, their faces torn between fear and hope. Then he turned back to Eleanor, his voice slow but resolute. Fine, you'll get your proof. In 30 days, we'll turn failure into a success story. A faint smile crossed Eleanor's lips. Whether encouragement or mockery, no one could tell. But one thing was certain. The real game had just begun. The heavy oak door closed behind them, and the team stepped into the long, red-carpeted hallway. No one spoke. The sound of their footsteps echoed like the ticking of a countdown clock. Inside the elevator, Rachel collapsed onto the bench, burying her face in her hands. 30 days? God, we don't even have a proper office. Luis let out a bitter laugh, half panic, half anger. She doesn't want to invest in us. She wants to kill us. David tried to stay positive, though his voice trembled. At least she gave us a chance, and a chance is better than nothing. Marcus stood still, eyes fixed on the numbers climbing the elevator panel. In his mind, 30 days shrank into hours, into minutes. It wasn't just a deadline, it was a noose tightening around their necks. Out on the street, Manhattan's wind howled, horns blared, and crowds rushed by. The four of them, huddled on the sidewalk, like tiny soldiers facing a giant beast. Marcus turned to them, his voice low but firm, slicing through their fear. Listen, we've got 30 days. It'll be exhausting, insane, sleepless, maybe worse than our very first startup. But if we pull this off, we won't just win Eleanor Grant. We'll silence the entire world. Rachel nodded faintly. Luis clenched his fists. David sighed but managed a smile. And in the middle of Manhattan's chaos, 4 small figures walked forward, carrying the weight of a ruthless challenge, and the fragile hope that they could rewrite destiny. Day 1 of the 30-day challenge. The tiny Brooklyn apartment had transformed into a makeshift office. The dining table buried under laptops, tangled chargers, half-eaten pizza boxes, and abandoned coffee cups. The air was tense, like a battlefield. Marcus stood before a whiteboard propped against the wall, writing in bold letters, Angela Torres. Beneath the name, he scrawled bullet points: target customers, sales channels, brand strategy, cash flow. Rachel typed furiously, the clacking of keys relentless. She looked up, panicked. Angela's customer database is practically empty, nothing but a messy list of emails. We'll have to rebuild from scratch, Luis groaned, tugging at his hair. The finances are worse. Her old company is drowning in debt. To restart, we'd need at least $50,000, and our account currently has 2340. Silence fell heavy. Everyone stared at each other, cold sweat forming. Marcus slammed his marker against the board, his voice firm. We don't need luxury. We don't need a perfect launch. We just need to prove one thing to Eleanor Grant, that Angela and our platform can make real money immediately. He turned to Rachel. Build an online sales channel in 48 hours. Then to Luis. Slash every unnecessary expense. If I have to mortgage this apartment for seed money, I will. The room went quiet. They knew Marcus wasn't bluffing, and in that moment it became clear. This 30-day challenge wasn't just a project. It was a fight for survival. That afternoon, Marcus arranged to meet Angela Torres at a small cafe in the Lower East Side. She arrived in a worn-out coat, hair tied in a messy bun, her face etched with exhaustion. Sitting down, Angela let out a bitter laugh. I don't get why you picked me. I went bankrupt. Lost my customers, lost my investors. Do you know what people call me now? The foolish dreamer with a pile of fabric scraps. Rachel gave her a sympathetic look, but Marcus leaned forward, eyes steady. That's exactly why we picked you. Where others see failure, we see opportunity. Angela, your product wasn't wrong. Your only mistake was targeting the wrong market. And we believe with the right direction, your brand can rise again. Angela scoffed, her laugh tinged with bitterness. Easy for you to say. I have nothing left, no money, no customers, no credibility. How do you expect to rebuild from ashes? Marcus didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pulled out his leather notebook, flipped to a fresh page, and slid it toward her. Written across it was the detailed plan the team had spent all night drafting, step by step, milestone by milestone, with real numbers. Luis added, We're not promising forever. We're asking for 30 days. If we fail, you lose nothing more. But if we succeed, you'll have a second chance, this time on a stronger foundation. Angela hesitated. Her eyes flickered, torn between doubt and the faint spark of hope. Finally, she sighed. 30 days? It sounds insane. But maybe I have nothing left to lose. All right, I'm in. Marcus smiled, clasping her hand firmly. Then let's begin. Your new story, and ours, starts today. Day 3 of the challenge. The Brooklyn apartment had turned into an improvised workshop, fabrics piled in corners, sketches on the floor, laptops glowing, the smell of coffee and stale pizza in the air. Rachel wrestled with the e-commerce site, fingers flying across the keyboard. Luis sat hunched over spreadsheets, eyes bloodshot. Angela stood in the middle, sketching designs with a frustrated frown. We can't just sell the old pieces, Angela snapped. Customers are bored of them. Without something new, this will crash from day one. Rachel shot her a glare. I don't even have the website ready yet. Where are we supposed to find time for a whole new collection? Luis cut in, exhausted. And what about money? We've got barely $2,500 left after renting a tiny workshop. If we don't generate cash flow fast, we'll be bankrupt before Eleanor even sees a single result. The tension was suffocating. Angela dropped her pencil, despair flashing across her face. I told you, this is insane. 30 days is impossible. Marcus, silent until now, rose to his feet. He strode to the whiteboard and wrote in big letters, "Speed and creativity." "Listen," he said firmly. "We don't need a perfect collection. We need something that hits the market immediately, a test product bold enough to spread fast." He turned to Angela. "Pick one design, just one. Simple to produce, but with a strong, clear message of sustainability. We'll launch it online as a test campaign. If customers bite, we expand. That's our only chance." Angela stared at him, doubt still clouding her eyes, but a flicker of hope breaking through. After a long pause, she nodded. "All right, I have one design, but it's risky. If it flops, we're done." Marcus smiled, replying calmly, "If we're not taking risks, we wouldn't even be here." Angela quietly pulled out an old canvas bag she always carried. From it, she took a folded sketch, creased and worn with age. She laid it on the table, taking a shaky breath. "This is the only design I've ever truly believed in, even though no one would back it. A plain white t-shirt made from recycled fabric with the words, 'I am not disposable,' printed across the chest. Simple, but I wanted it to speak for an entire generation." Rachel frowned. "A t-shirt? That's it?" Angela nodded. "Yes, I can't afford a complex collection, but everyone wears t-shirts, and this message could spread online. If we're lucky, it could become a symbol." Marcus studied the sketch for a long moment, then smiled. "It doesn't take complexity to make an impact. Sometimes simplicity is unforgettable. I believe in this." Luis tapped his pen against the table, crunching numbers. "If we produce just 200 units, we can scrape together enough funds. But we'd have to sell out within a week or else. It's game over." The room came alive with urgency. Rachel dove into designing a website dedicated to selling that one shirt. Angela called a small workshop willing to take a rush order. Luis drafted the financial plan, while Marcus outlined a bold promo campaign. A short, hard-hitting video aimed directly at Gen Z emotions. Outside, a light drizzle blurred the streets. Inside the cramped apartment, 4 people pinned all their hopes on a single white t-shirt. They knew this was their only card to play. Win, and they lived. Lose, and it was over. Launch day came faster than they expected. The website had only one product, the plain white t-shirt with the words, "I am not disposable." Marcus sat at his laptop, cursor hovering over the publish button. The room was so silent they could all hear each other's heartbeat. "All right," Marcus said, voice steady. "This is it. All or nothing." He clicked. The website went live. Immediately, Rachel posted their promo video across TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube Shorts. In the clip, Angela stood in a wasteland of discarded fabric, wearing the white t-shirt, her voice echoing, "I'm not disposable, and neither are you. Wear something that speaks your worth." It lasted only 30 seconds, but it was powerful enough to leave the team breathless. The first reaction came minutes later. Order number 1 flashed on the screen. The room exploded in cheers. Rachel hugged Angela. Luis jumped from his chair shouting, "We sold our first one!" But after the cheers, reality hit. They needed to sell 200 shirts in a week. One order wouldn't save them. Marcus sat down, eyes locked on the screen. Order number 2 appeared, then number 3. His pulse raced. But then, nothing. The screen went still. "No new orders," Angela whispered nervously. "What if people only bought out of curiosity? What if it stops here?" Marcus clenched his fist, meeting their eyes. "No, this is only the beginning. If the world isn't watching yet, then we'll make sure they can't look away." That night, the team huddled around the small dining table, the glow of the laptop screens casting worried shadows across their faces. The dashboard blinked. 7 orders. The number felt like a bucket of cold water dumped over their initial excitement. Rachel groaned, running her hands through her hair. "We need at least 200 orders. At this pace, we won't make it in a month, let alone a week." Angela bit her lip, eyes welling. "Maybe I was wrong. Maybe the market doesn't want me anymore." Marcus slammed his hand on the table, his voice firm. "No, we haven't lost yet. The problem isn't the product, it's how we make people see it." He turned to Luis. "How much ad money do we have left?" Luis flipped through the spreadsheet, sighing. "Barely $500. Marcus was silent for a moment, then a determined smile spread across his face. "Then we don't use money. We use creativity." On the whiteboard, he scrawled, "Go viral." "If Gen Z is our target, then let's make them our marketers. A TikTok challenge, a strong hashtag, a story that hits them in the heart. We don't need a big budget. We need to make people want to be part of this movement. Rachel nodded quickly. A hashtag campaign. We can use the slogan itself, I am not disposable. Angela looked up, her eyes flickering with light. What if I tell my real story? Bankruptcy, humiliation, but I didn't quit. Show them that this shirt isn't just fashion. It's a declaration. Marcus grinned at the team. Exactly. We're not selling a shirt. We're selling a message, a movement. The room suddenly filled with new energy. They had just found the weapon that might turn failure into opportunity, making one T-shirt the voice of a generation. The next day, the campaign went live. Rachel edited the new video. Angela sat in front of the camera, barefaced, eyes steady, her voice trembling but resolute. I'm Angela Torres. I failed. I went bankrupt. They called me a foolish dreamer, but I am not disposable, and neither are you. If you believe your worth can't be thrown away, join me in saying, I am not disposable. The video ended with Angela holding up the white T-shirt as the hashtag, Gandrach, I am not disposable, flashed across the screen. Rachel hit post. Then they waited. 10 minutes passed. Nothing. 20 minutes later, just a handful of views. Luis groaned, burying his face in his arms. Then suddenly, a notification, new duet on TikTok. A young woman appeared on screen, wearing an ordinary shirt looking straight into the camera. I just watched Angela's story. I've been called useless, too. But I am not disposable. The hashtag, I am not disposable, began to spread. One after another, people uploaded their own stories. Students denied scholarships. Employees laid off. Artists mocked for their dreams. Each repeated the same words, a collective declaration. Rachel's jaw dropped. Angela covered her face, tears streaming down. Marcus stood, eyes fixed on the screen as notifications exploded. 1,000 views, 10,000 views, 50,000 views. Luis shouted, Oh my God, we're going viral! In their cramped apartment, none of them could believe it. A simple message had turned into the roar of a generation, and this was only the beginning. That evening, the Brooklyn apartment glowed with laptop screens. Rachel kept refreshing the sales dashboard, and every time the notification "Order confirmed" popped up, the team erupted like fans at a championship game. 50 orders! Rachel screamed, her voice cracking. Angela sat frozen for a moment, then covered her mouth, sobbing. People are actually buying. They're not just hearing my story. They believe in it. Luis stared at the sales chart as the numbers climbed. 50, 80, 20, he shouted. God, at this rate, we're going to sell out. Marcus didn't shout. He stood by the window gazing at the city lights below, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Deep inside, he knew this wasn't about a few shirts sold. This was the spark of a movement. Rachel's phone buzzed. I am not disposable trending. Top 10 on TikTok US. The room froze for a second, then exploded like thunder. David slammed the table. We're not just selling shirts. We've started a storm. By midnight, the website recorded the 200th order. The team collapsed into chairs, exhausted but laughing through tears. Angela hugged Marcus tightly, whispering, You made me believe in myself again. And they believe too, Marcus replied softly, firmly. This is only day 7. Our story has just begun. Outside, the hashtag kept climbing, with thousands more videos joining in. A movement had truly been born. The next morning, the Brooklyn apartment was still littered with pizza boxes, coffee cups, and laptops glowing from the all-nighter. The team dozed on couches when Marcus's phone buzzed. On the screen flashed a name everyone instantly recognized. Eleanor Grant. Marcus froze for a beat, swallowed, then answered. On the other end, Eleanor's voice was cold, commanding, Marcus Johnson, I just saw I am not disposable trending top 5 on TikTok, and I hear you sold out 200 shirts in a single week. Marcus kept his tone calm. Yes, ma'am, but that was just the beginning. We're preparing for the second production run. Eleanor gave a short laugh, sharp, precise, silencing the room. I'm not surprised you made noise. What surprises me is that you did it with nothing but a cheap T-shirt. Tell me, Marcus, was this luck or strategy? Marcus answered without hesitation. Strategy, Miss Grant, because luck doesn't repeat itself. And what we've started is becoming a movement. There was a pause. Then Eleanor spoke again. I want to see you. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Don't bring PowerPoint. Bring proof you can turn a trend into a real company. The line went dead. Marcus lowered the phone, meeting the stunned gazes of his team. He smiled. She wants to see us again. The next battle has arrived. That night, the Brooklyn apartment once again turned into a war room. The whiteboard was crammed with notes, sticky papers plastered across the walls, laptops flashing with spreadsheets and charts. Rachel typed furiously, muttering, If the website crashes again when orders spike, Eleanor will laugh in our faces. I'll upgrade the payment system tonight. Louise spread papers across the table, voice tight. I ran the numbers. If we scale to 2,000 shirts in 1 month, the cost of materials and operations will exceed our current funds by at least 4 times. We need to prove demand isn't just a short-lived trend, it has to sustain. Angela sat silently, her eyes heavy with doubt. Marcus walked over, resting a hand on her shoulder. Angela, I need you. Your story is the soul of this movement. Tomorrow Ms. Grant will look at you and decide whether to believe. Don't be afraid. Just be yourself. Angela lifted her gaze, eyes rimmed with tears, but glowing with resolve. I used to tremble when speaking about my failure. But now, if that story can save thousands of people from believing they're disposable, I'll tell it again. David held up the tiny projector, grinning through dark circles under his eyes. And I'll make sure that story shines clear on the screen. No flashy PowerPoint, just the truth. Marcus looked around the room, his voice ringing like a vow. Tomorrow, we're not just meeting Eleanor Grant. We're proving that a movement can become a company, and a company can change the game. The small room filled with the sound of fists hitting the table, nervous laughter and shared determination. In their eyes, there was no fear left, only a fire, ready to blaze into tomorrow's battle. The next morning, the 42nd floor of the Manhattan Tower once again opened to Marcus and his team. Unlike their first visit, they walked in with confidence mixed with determination, though they knew one misstep could shatter everything. Eleanor Grant was already seated, her face unreadable. She tapped her fingers lightly on the table, signaling, Begin. Show me proof. Rachel switched on the projector. The screen filled with clips of viral videos, growth charts of the audits, I am not disposable hashtag, and sales numbers, 200 shirts sold out in 7 days. Luis followed, his tone precise. We're not just proving short-term demand. Here's repeat growth. The first 200 shirts sold out in a week, and when we opened pre-orders for the next batch, we received over 500 orders in just 48 hours. Angela stepped forward, taking a deep breath. No charts, no papers, just her voice. I was a walking failure. They called me worthless, disposable. But today, thousands wear this shirt and say the same words. I am not disposable. They're not buying fabric. They're buying belief that their lives have value. That's what we're building. Eleanor stayed silent, her piercing eyes locked on Marcus. Impressive, but a movement is easy to spark and just as easy to burn out. Marcus, I want to know, what's your plan to turn a hashtag into a real company? If the hashtag dies tomorrow, what will you still have left? The question hit like a hammer. All eyes turned to Marcus. He took a deep breath, a faint smile playing on his lips, and slowly opened his worn leather notebook. Marcus opened his worn leather notebook, pages filled with scribbles, bullet points, and coffee stains. He raised his head, locking eyes with Eleanor, his voice calm but resolute. Ms. Grant, the hashtag is just the spark. What we are building is an ecosystem. This isn't a t-shirt company. It's a platform that connects social movements with sustainable commerce. He pointed to his hand-drawn diagram, product expansion. From t-shirts to shoes, backpacks, accessories, all made from recycled materials. Digital platform. The website won't just sell products. It will become a space for anyone to share their story under iamnotdisposable.community and events, hosting workshops and gatherings where failed individuals can connect, support, and inspire one another. Marcus paused, eyes burning with conviction. If the hashtag dies tomorrow, we'll still have real products, real revenue, and a real community. Once people are united by shared values, a movement doesn't die, it evolves. Angela stepped forward, her voice trembling but powerful. I'm living proof. They didn't buy my shirt because it's the prettiest. They bought it because they saw themselves in the message. and we will turn that message into a global brand." The room fell silent. Eleanor neither nodded nor shook her head. She simply stared at Marcus for a long moment, then smirked slightly. "You dream big, Marcus Johnson, but big dreams are double-edged. Let's see if you have the strength to make this one real." Marcus answered instantly without hesitation. "This isn't a dream, Ms. Grant. This is the future being written." The room held its breath. Eleanor Grant slowly rose, walking toward the glass wall overlooking Manhattan's glittering skyline. Arms crossed, her voice was calm, yet commanding. "Marcus Johnson, you and your team have surprised me. Few can turn a social media movement into real revenue, but I don't invest in surprises. I invest in endurance." She turned, her eyes sharp as a blade. "I'm willing to invest $2 million in your company. But there's one condition." The team froze. Eleanor continued deliberately. "Within 60 days, you must expand from a single T-shirt to at least 3 additional product lines. And not just in the U.S. I want proof this movement can go international. If you succeed, I'll release the full investment. If you fail, not only do you lose this deal, but your newly rebuilt reputation will be crushed." Angela's face went pale. 60 days? You're asking us to build a global brand in 2 months? Eleanor smiled thinly, unblinking. Exactly. I want to know if you're just a story or an empire. Marcus's heart pounded. This was a golden chance, but also a cliff's edge. He looked to his team. Rachel's face was tight, but her eyes shone. Luis clenched his jaw. Angela trembled, but stood firm. Turning back to Eleanor, Marcus smiled. "Ms. Grant, we've never chosen the easy path. We choose the right one, and we will deliver." Eleanor gave a small nod, her gaze unreadable. The final game had just begun. Back at the cramped Brooklyn apartment, the team huddled around a table piled high with papers and laptops. For several minutes, no one spoke. The weight of Eleanor's challenge pressed down on the room like lead. Luis finally broke the silence. 3 new product lines in 60 days? With the funds we have, that's suicide. Rachel shot back instantly. No, it's not suicide. We can't follow the traditional playbook. We need another path, leveraging the community that's already spreading the hashtag. Angela hesitated. You mean letting customers help design the products? Rachel nodded firmly. Exactly. We don't have time for market research, but we have tens of thousands of people sharing the hashtag. Let them choose recycled backpacks, shoes, accessories. Marcus listened, then smiled. On the whiteboard, he scrawled 3 bold words, community-driven. This isn't just our company, it's their movement. If we let them co-create, they won't just be customers, they'll be our most loyal advocates. David jumped in. As for going international, the hashtag's already trending in the UK and Canada. We could target Europe first, launch online campaigns instead of physical stores. Luis still looked uneasy, but he nodded. If the community leads, research and ad costs drop to almost nothing. The real pressure will be on production. Angela glanced around, her eyes shining for the first time since Eleanor's meeting. I used to think my brand was just a personal dream, but now it's becoming a generation's dream. So let's let them decide the future. Marcus clenched the marker in his hand, his voice sharp with resolve. Good, then it starts now. 60 days. Either we build an empire or we disappear. 3 days later, Rachel launched an online poll. What should the next I Nam Not disposable product be? Within 24 hours, tens of thousands of votes poured in. The results stunned the team. Recycled plastic backpacks, 42% sneakers made from fabric scraps, 36% small accessories, bracelets, tote bags, 22%. Angela stared at the chart, eyes wide. Oh my God, they don't just care. They want to be part of it. At that moment, Luis's inbox exploded with notifications. He opened them, reading in disbelief. A university in London wants 300 backpacks for their students. And here, a boutique fashion chain in Toronto is asking to collaborate. The room erupted. Rachel burst into tears, hugging Angela. David laughed so hard he nearly fell off his chair. Marcus, calmer than the rest, simply nodded. This is the power of community. They're not just buying, they're spreading. Angela's voice shook, her eyes glistening. I thought the world had turned its back on me. But now, The world is calling my name. Marcus placed a hand on her shoulder, his gaze fierce. No, Angela, they're not just calling your name. Through you, they're calling their own. Outside, the hashtag #IamNotDisposable hit the top trending list in Europe for the first time. The tiny Brooklyn apartment had just become the command center of a global wave. That afternoon, as the team celebrated international emails flooding in, Marcus's phone buzzed again. The name on the screen, Eleanor Grant. Instantly, the room went silent. Marcus answered. Eleanor's voice came cold with a trace of intrigue. I hear you've received orders from London and Toronto. Seems your movement is spreading beyond borders and touching real commerce. Marcus kept calm. Yes, ma'am. And this is just the beginning. Eleanor cut in sharply. Beginnings are easy. What I want to know is, can you sustain it? A hashtag can spread, but producing thousands of backpacks and sneakers for international markets, that's a different game. Do you have a supply chain? Operations? Or will you hand-deliver them yourself? Luis paled, frantically checking his spreadsheets. Rachel bit her lip. Angela clenched her sleeve. After a pause, Marcus replied, We don't have everything yet, but we have community, belief, and the ability to mobilize faster than anyone else. And if you open the door, we'll turn these orders into the foundation of an empire. On the other end, Eleanor chuckled softly, a sound halfway between mockery and approval. Confident, Marcus Johnson, but confidence isn't enough. I'll visit your team next week. By then, I expect to see not just orders, but a real international production plan. Otherwise, I'll consider this nothing but luck. The call ended. Marcus set the phone down, taking a deep breath. The team exchanged looks, fear mixing with fire. He spoke quietly but firmly. We have 7 days to turn belief into reality. And this time, failure isn't an option.